good? Yes, we're good. Great. Hello, friends, and welcome. Thank you for joining me for this, I guess you'd call it a limited series of sorts. As some of you know, I dare say, I'm in the process of launching my first book out into the world, and it's a book about cannabis and my story with cannabis, and it's something that I've realized more and more as I've kind of put it out there that I'm doing this thing, that there is a conversation to be had around it, a really important conversation, and one to treat with a great deal of care and respect and a certain responsibility that I feel now that I've kind of come out as a cannabis user. So I want to have that conversation, and that's what I'm doing here. I'm planning on, over the next 25 days, releasing a video every single day that tackles like a different topic, a different area about cannabis, about my story, and just about this wonderful plant that we have available to us. But also, this is a plant that's caught up in a great deal of stigma, a great deal of misinformation, and a great deal of, a great deal of kind of awfulness throughout history. And I want to talk about it. I want to just open this conversation and share a bit about my story and how it came into my life and effectively why I've chosen to write a book about it. A big thank you for joining me, whether you're watching via the videos on YouTube or if you're listening via a podcast. And this is, of course, day 1 of 25. And for this particular day, folks, I want to talk about why I have chosen to come out as a cannabis user, why I use it at all, why I've chosen to write a book about it. Just answer those questions and also answer the question of who am I? Who am I to be talking about this? Maybe that's a good point to start, actually, because who am I? I am not a cannabis expert. I am not a medical professional in any sense. I'm only an expert in my own story. And that is something that I actually think is really useful for this conversation. I love listening to experts speak, of course. And that's incredibly important that we do that. But also, one of the reasons that I feel I might have something to offer here is that I'm just a human. I'm just a guy. To give you a bit of background on me, I've made my living as a dance professional. I'm a teacher, performer, choreographer. I've performed in shows all over the world, and I've taught thousands of people all across the world, both in person and online, how to dance, specifically how to tap dance. That's been my main focus. And I've had just a tremendous life in the process. And the element of creativity with cannabis as well is something that I really want to talk about because that is primarily how it's affected me. But as you'll see, folks, we're going to dive into kind of every element, or certainly a great deal of areas around the cannabis plant and the effects of cannabis. Now, usually I would edit a lot. I don't often kind of just go off script, but that's what I want to do here because I don't want to overthink this and I just want to have an actual conversation. So that, first of all, I'm going off my notes. I'm keeping it super casual. This is very unlike me, but why not? So I have this story to tell, and I do believe that it is important and useful and kind of relevant to the conversation about cannabis because for most of my life, I was completely against it. I, like many of us, I dare say, was kind of drilled the stigma from a young age. And it was very much like, you must never, ever, ever touch this. And there are good reasons why a parent would say that to their children. And I know that this is still, of course, happening across the world. And that was drilled into me from a very loving place, of course. No parent wants to worry about their children going down the path of drugs and the potential link to schizophrenia and all of that. It can be very terrifying for parents. And already in the conversation of actually putting this out to the world, I've had people reach out to me saying, Bill, I really want to support your book, but I just can't do it because I can't have a book about cannabis lying around my house where my teenage son could find it. That is so fair and so understandable. But yes, getting back to the story, I was completely against it. And whenever it came up as a possibility for me to actually do, the answer was an immediate, no thanks, not for me. And I also believed the stereotypes. I believed that cannabis users were, a certain type of person. They were hippies, and nothing against hippies, of course, or they were stuck on their couch indulging in drugs and junk food and video games. Nothing against junk food and video games, but it was just very clearly like, okay, this is not something I even want to consider messing with. And I didn't. And it was only in my late 20s, I was 27 at the time, and I was going through what I now understand is a common, though not very well-known phase called the quarter life crisis. I was burned out and I was overwhelmed, and the opportunity came up. A friend who I didn't realize was a cannabis user offered it to me and said, come on over, we're having some weed. Would you like to partake? And there was like, and of course, there was a big part of me that was like, no, don't touch it, don't go near it. But then another part of me was like, is it not time to just like live a little? And, I came from a very kind of, I don't know, sheltered, I guess you could call it, upbringing. And I was very I was very much diligently into music practice and dance practice, and part of me was just like, I think it's time to have some fun. Like, let's just do it. Let's just try it. And I did a little bit of research, and I found out that cannabis had never killed anyone directly, compared to various other substances like tobacco and alcohol. Cannabis in that way is seemingly very, very safe. And so I thought, okay, it's time to live a little. Let's give it a try. And I did. And my friends guided me through the process in a really, really lovely way. And it was a tremendous, beautiful experience, one that just completely opened my eyes to what the potential of this plant is. And it also showed me that I had been perhaps taught the wrong thing. Not necessarily, but in ways like I hadn't been given the full picture. My education wasn't complete around cannabis. And then suddenly it was like, wow, okay, I was wrong. I've been taught the wrong thing, and a whole new pathway opened up for me. What I then found was that cannabis is a tremendous tool for creativity and insight and inspiration. And this was the way, and remains so to this day, that I found the most value in cannabis and in using cannabis. And I know that there are many others who find the same thing. Cannabis became more and more a part of my life, and I basically found my way to daily use, using it for creativity, using it for finding flow state, and just general improvement of most every part of my life. Food tastes better, as they say, showers are better, sex is better, all of this. I found this. It's like, wow, my gosh, what a tremendous tool. This natural tool that we have, cannabis, the plant, holy moly, what it offers us. It was just kind of mind-blowing. And in my mind, I was like, wow, I was taught the wrong thing, or I wasn't given the full picture. So everything that I learned about drugs and about cannabis, it's kind of wrong now. That's how I saw it. And in my mind, I thought, there's no limit. There's no limit to how high I can go and how good the effects can actually be in my life. Everything was improving. And then I did go too far. I had a bad experience on cannabis, which I talk about in detail in the book. And I will circle back to that at another time, because I feel that that's important to share about that very dark experience that I had. Suffice to say that I subjected myself to a psychologically intense, kind of disturbing situation, and I had a reaction to it while I was high. Then my whole perspective changed. Then it was as it would. I realized that I hadn't properly respected the power of this plant, and I realized that there was a tremendous gap in my education around cannabis that had I had, I'm relatively sure that that event would not have actually happened. But it did, and I'm glad that it did, because it provided a really useful perspective and ultimately paved the way for the writing of this book. Needless to say, I've learned so much on my journey. And I know that word journey is like kind of like, we don't like that word, but also it has been a journey in the truth of it. I see the full picture now, or I see what I feel is the full picture, or a more full picture at least. And I see that there are so many people who are confused about cannabis or caught up in the stigma and the misinformation that we've been kind of told for 100 years now, basically. Some people say it's harmless. Some people say it's the devil's weed. Don't go near it. Don't touch it. And of course, we've got these two polar opposites. And it's like, oh, the truth, of course, as with everything, lies somewhere in the middle. And that's why I feel a balanced conversation is really, really important. I don't believe that cannabis is harmless or without potential to harm, at least. And I want to talk about that more. I'm going to. So friends, that's what we're doing here. And that's why I've chosen to write a book about it. I don't specifically want to become the cannabis guy. I don't want to become known as the cannabis guy. And already I've seen like people just like ever so slightly distancing themselves from me. Most people are so supportive, of course, and it's tremendous and it's beautiful. But a lot of people are like, oh, how do I feel about this? You know, and that is such an understandable reaction. The stigma still exists, and it's likely going to for some time. Hence why these conversations are so important. But effectively, this is the story that I had to tell. I feel like it can offer something, and I don't want to keep it to myself any longer. I want to create something beautiful from it and something that helps people. And I really hope that's what it does. There's so many elements to this conversation, to this topic, and there's so many possible ways that I could go with this, you know, and just to touch on a few that I'm actually not going to talk about a great deal. But first of all, cannabis as a plant, right? All the different compounds like THC and CBD, what does all that mean? I encourage you to look at the many other videos that already explain that. Also, the hemp plant, you know, the tremendous tool and the tremendous fiber that we have in the hemp plant. I just want to acknowledge that as well. Hemp is cannabis, just to be clear. And also cannabis as a medicine. Now, this is crucial, of course, and thank goodness that even in places like Australia, where cannabis is not yet legal for recreational use, medicinal cannabis is available largely. And fingers crossed, it is available for anyone who's watching this video right now, because cannabis as a medicine, what it can do, you know, for so many different things is just tremendous and beautiful. And like, when you think about it, a natural plant, like, that's incredible. This is a natural growing thing. Yes, humans have guided it in terms of like how we've chosen to breed it and like how we've chosen to, I don't know, cultivate it. But this is a natural thing and it's freaking tremendous. So I wanted to acknowledge that. Cannabis as a medicine and as a plant and a fiber, so good. I encourage you to dive deeper into that story if you feel so inclined. However, in these videos, folks, at least for now, I'm going to be focused on the use of cannabis as a psychological stimulant and as a tool for wellness and wonder and creativity. I'd also encourage you to look at the story of cannabis, the last 100 years, and this kind of demonization and this stigma that has come about by this awful time of misinformation. There's a really fascinating story there. I write about it in the book in brief, but I encourage you to dive into that as well. It is well worth a look. Now, across these next 25 days, I'm going to try to answer every question that I receive on these videos. Again, it's really important to me that I have a balanced conversation around this. Even though my experience with cannabis has been largely positive, I am obviously well aware of the other side of that. There is a dark side. There is a need for any cannabis user to be incredibly respectful of this plant, of the power of this plant, safe, responsible use, adult use. We'll get to that. Please be part of the conversation. Post a comment, ask me a question, and I will answer as best I can every single question that comes in. I also really encourage you to subscribe to the page, obviously. Follow me at Tap Dancing Bill and check out the book at drenchedinwonder.com. As you'll see, it's more than just a story. I've also included photography from when I've been under the influence all over the world, and also some of the raw handwritten notes that I've captured. It's a really special thing. Check it out, drenchedinwonder.com. Support the Kickstarter if you can. And if you're watching from the future, hopefully the book is available to you as well. So that's it for day one. Join me for day two, where I'm going to be talking about stigma and stereotypes. I've dove into a little bit here. I'm going to dive into it more so tomorrow. Thank you for joining me. Like and subscribe, do all the things. I'll see you again soon.